Welcome to Eric's Old Time Radio. My name is Eric Rupp, and I am your host. Today, we are going to be talking about one of the greatest figures in the history of radio drama, and that is Jack Johnstone. Now, a lot of you are familiar with Jack Johnstone. You've heard the name many times. Some of you are very familiar with Jack Johnstone, knowing which shows he worked on. But a lot of people, sadly, are not as familiar with Johnstone as they are with some of the shows he was involved in. And what I'm going to do today is go over his history, what he contributed to radio drama, and just what an amazing figure he was. One of his first jobs in radio was working on The Adventures of Superman in the late 30s as a writer. So Superman, like Johnny Dollar later on, was a serialized format. It had multi-part stories. They were able to develop. It was largely like a movie serial at the time. That's the way they did The Adventures of Superman on the radio. From there, he went on to other jobs, including being a director for the Hollywood Star Playhouse. It was one of those anthology shows where they would have various different big-name movie stars on each week. He was the director and actor on a show called The Man Called X. That show was on from 1944 to 1948. It was an adventure, espionage, spy kind of show, and he was involved in that. His first major contribution to radio, though, was with the six-shooter in the early 50s. Getting Jimmy Stewart to be the star of a radio show was a nifty trick. And Jimmy Stewart's career was kind of in a lull at that point, but he was still a name. He was a big name. And getting him to be a regular on a radio show was a big deal, and Johnstone was able to get him in. And Johnstone served as the writer, director, producer. He didn't write all of the episodes, but he wrote a good number of them. He directed a good number of them. He was the producer. He set the tone, and what really set the six-shooter apart from other shows at the time is it was a very adult show. It was very mature. One thing that I've commented to my own dad years ago. I mean, going back 30 years when I've been listening to Six Shooter for 40 years. But the one thing I noticed was how Jimmy Stewart, and I am sure with the encouragement and the approval of Johnstone, was not your typical radio actor. Jimmy Stewart, or James Stewart as they billed him and as he was always billed, he would often talk in hushed tones. He was very quiet, sometimes whispering.
You gotta start moving. What about Ponce? Are you awake? I don't think so. Brett?
I don't know what it was that kept me from answering back, but I just laid there, hardly breathing, not moving, not even opening my eyes.
Guess he's still asleep.
Yeah. We ain't gonna need him the rest of the way, Lex.
That's what I figured.
Trouble is, he knows our names, what we look like. Sooner or later, he'd put two and two together.
You didn't have to tell him who he was.
I knew it wouldn't make no difference one way or the other.
You're gonna shoot him, kid?
Nope. You are.
Me?
Yeah. I'm already wanted for a couple of killings, Lex. But they're only after you for robbery. Even though you're my brother, if the going got too rough someday, you might want to ease out of the partnership.
You know better than that, kid.
I'll know it for sure. After you kill Ponce. Well?
Okay, kid. Whatever you say.
I'll get the horses. Hurry it up.
I heard Kit move off across the clearing. For a minute, that's all I heard. Then Lex started moving, too. I lifted my eyelids just a hair, and I saw him through the lashes. He pulled his revolver out of the holster. My gun belt was lying right beside me, and I inched my left hand toward it real slow so he wouldn't notice. I felt my fingers slide across a couple of stones, but the gun was still a little space beyond. I hadn't touched it yet. Lex was standing right over me now. I wasn't going to have much more time.
and it increased the drama. It increased the tension of the scenes. He was not being your typical radio guy. He was being a great actor. And that was just really neat to hear. The shows had a different feel than the Westerns of the time. Years later, they would bring the show to TV. By that point, Jimmy Stewart was doing well in movies again, and he didn't have the time to do a series. The character's name was changed from Britt Ponsett to Vint Bonner, and John Payne got that role. And that was a good TV show, a little more standard issue Western by the time they translated it to TV, but it was still very good. But the six-shooter really helped elevate radio drama to a place higher than TV drama was at the time. Now, after the six-shooter ended, Johnstone's next big project was to completely revamp Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar. Now, Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar had been running from the late 40s up through 1954, and they took a break. And he came in and he had an idea to do that, kind of like the Adventures of Superman. Let's not just have a standard issue half-hour show. And so that was something where the network liked the idea. 5 nights a week, that one and another show would each run 15 minutes.
Johnny Dollar.
Don Wilkins, Johnny. Tri-Mutual Limited.
Oh, hi, Don. Thanks for the Christmas present.
Well, just don't take out the cork near an open flame.
Yeah.
Say, you know anything about a guy named Mel Pryker?
Nothing good about him. Why?
Got himself killed last night. Murdered.
Pryker was born to be murdered.
Maybe so, but not at our expense. We're holding a $100,000 policy on him.
Wow. Who's the beneficiary?
His partner, Nick Shern.
Nick Shern. You picked a fine pair of rats.
Yeah, I know that now. The New York police are holding Shern, but they've got no evidence. Go down there and check it out for us, Johnny. If Nick did the killing, we're off the hook.
Any witnesses?
One, apparently, the hat-check girl in that nightclub of theirs.
What's her story?
I wish I knew. She's disappeared. We've got to find her, Johnny, before some of Nick's hoodlums find her.
Don, maybe they already have.
Tonight and every weekday night, Bob Bailey in the transcribed adventures of the man with the action-packed expense account, America's fabulous freelance insurance investigator.
Yours truly, Johnny Dollar.
And that way you'd get a 75-minute show over the course of a week. That would really give the writers a chance to develop characters, to flesh out the plot, to give the show more breathing room, have more subplots, have more supporting characters. And it worked. Yours truly, Johnny Dollar, during that year where they were doing it 5 nights a week, was, in my opinion, the greatest radio drama of all time. He hired Bob Bailey to play Johnny Dollar. Interestingly enough, Bailey had been in the 5th episode of the series as a guest star, and now he was being brought in to play the lead, Johnny Dollar. This after Bailey's turn in Let George Do It, which was a good detective show, but not as good as Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, but then what was. So Johnstone would write a huge number of the shows. He would direct a good number. He was the producer. He really set the tone, and Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar elevated radio drama. And it had already been elevated by the six-shooter and several other shows. Richard Diamond, a number of other shows. Philip Marlowe was above average. These shows were growing up. The writers were doing a better and better job. And because there were less censorship issues on radio than there were on TV, not a lot less, but enough that they could come up with more mature, adult, realistic shows and stories. I mean, Dragnet touched on a lot of issues that, on the radio that they couldn't do on TV. And so that was something where you got that on radio, and it was really neat to hear. And so that run on Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, Jack Johnstone really made that happen. And those of you who are like me and love Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, we owe Jack Johnstone a huge debt of gratitude. And I think he knew it. I suspect that he knew how much people liked that show. And he was a writer to the end. Even when they shifted the production of Johnny Dollar to New York from Hollywood, and he was no longer directly producing the show, he was still writing for it. And he was also writing for suspense. And Jack Johnstone wrote the final episodes of the major radio drama era. 1962, Yours Truly, Johnny Dollar, and Suspense aired back-to-back. The final night of new programming, he wrote both of the final 2 episodes. So he wrote Johnny Dollar and Suspense for their final episodes. And no one would have been more appropriate to do that than Jack Johnstone. He was a great radio writer, producer, director, and sometimes actor. And he turned down a number of opportunities after the radio era ended. He turned down opportunities to get involved in TV. People were offering him all sorts of producer and writer jobs. He turned them all down, and he basically retired at the age of 56. So that's really kind of shocking. It's unfortunate for TV. We didn't get any TV shows from Jack Johnstone, but at the same time, he did such a great job on radio. I mean, who could complain? I mean, he had done such a fantastic job. So Jack Johnstone, to me, is one of the greatest figures of the radio era. And it's time that he got more recognition. So that's what we're doing here today, giving him that recognition and saying thank you to the late Jack Johnstone.